What's going on, guys? It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. This time I'm going to go over everything that you guys need to know after the first week of preseason action here. We're finally getting into seeing some real football. We're getting to see the pads collide. It's been a lot of fun. There's a lot that we learned over this last off season or last last week of preseason. Obviously, nothing's guaranteed after what we see in the preseason. I think in general you'll see a lot of overreactions, and I think I'm going to be here to help you guys sort through the noise, let you guys know what matters and what doesn't, and just sort of keep you guys up to date as well, because obviously nobody has time to watch all of the preseason games, but I watched quite a few of them, and I also made sure I got a nice summary and did some research on how each game went, so I'm pretty well informed. I'm here to sort of condense that all for you guys so that you guys can sort of get a nice, concise list of what you guys need to know and really save yourselves the time and just get some one-stop shopping here in terms of what happened over this last weekend. I'll be doing these for each of the preseason weeks as well to keep you guys up to date heading up into your drafts so that you guys are as up to date as possible going into your draft season and so you guys can really be as well equipped as possible. So, yeah, really fun making these videos, really fun staying informed, and really fun to see some football start. So, yeah, with that, let's get into the first game. Starting us off with the Texans at Patriots. The Patriots rested most of their starters. There wasn't a whole lot to learn on the Patriots side of the ball. C.J. Stroud struggled throwing an interception, but he did show some flashes, and he showed a lot of chemistry with Tank Dell. He was the rookie wide receiver they drafted in the third round this season. I've talked about him a little bit so far this offseason, how I think he's actually a really good player. I think he's going to have some legitimate flex value. He scored a touchdown this week. He had like 5 catches for 65 yards. He's going to be a legitimately good player this season. He could be a guy that's actually pretty relevant in PPR formats, especially in deeper leagues. Dameon Pierce got the day off for the Texans this week. That signals pretty strongly to me that Dameon Pierce is the lead back in Houston. Devin Singletary did play, so that makes it pretty clear to me that I maybe was a little bit too harsh about Dameon Pierce heading into this offseason. I really thought this was going to be a bit closer to a 50-50 timeshare, but now I'm leaning a little bit more heavily towards giving Dameon Pierce more work. Dameon Pierce will likely be moving up in my rankings. I'll be sure to try and update those throughout the course of this week as well, so you guys can stay up to date with that. I still think Devin Singletary is going to get quite a bit of pass catching work and really limit Dameon Pierce's upside, but I think Pierce is going to be better than I thought he was going to be. On the Patriots side of the ball, even though it wasn't exactly related to the preseason game, they did sign Ezekiel Elliott today being Monday, August 14th. Ezekiel Elliott's going to come in there and be their short yardage guy. He'll probably get some goal line work. That was an area where Ramondre Stevenson struggled last season. He was one of the least efficient running backs inside the 20, and I think we could see him honestly lose out on some legitimate touchdown upside. I think this does kind of remove like the top 3, top 5 upside that I thought Ramondre Stevenson might have this season, but at the same time, I think Ezekiel Elliott's just going to be like a poor man's Damian Harris for the Patriots offense this year. He'll get probably 30% of the running back carries, get the short yardage work. Ramondre Stevenson is still very clearly going to get all the pass catching work in this offense. I still think that Ramondre is going to be a low-end running back 1 this season, and depending on how his draft value tanks, I think this could actually be really good for Ramondre, and that I think he might be a lot cheaper now, and I don't really think this really limited what I actually expect Ramondre to do this season. So I still love Ramondre. I think he's going to be like a low-end running back 1. Still has like top 6, top 7 upside this season, but just the chance of him being like a league-winning RB top 3 running back this season took a pretty significant hit with this signing. Next up, we've got the game between the Vikings and the Seahawks. Jordan Addison played in this one. He made a couple of really nice plays. He had a really nice toe tap catch along the sideline that was ruled incomplete by the officials, but in an actual game, it would have been challenged. It would have been called a catch, and he showed flashes of how good he can truly be. On top of that, for the Vikings, Tyson Chandler handled most of the running back snaps early on in the game, and he really shined as a backup. He caught several passes, was a really explosive runner, and even though Alexander Madison got the day off, that means Madison is very clearly the starter. I think this does mean that Tyson Chandler could have some legitimate value, especially if Alexander Madison goes down. Chandler's likely in line to be the backup running back now after that week 1 performance. There's still a chance they sign another running back. They've been linked to Kareem Hunt. I visited with him. The head coach mentioned that Kareem Hunt might be a fit for their offense. So depending on what happens there, Chandler could have value this season. But for now, I would expect Chandler to be the backup in Minnesota. Jackson Smith-Njigba played. He was fine. He had 3 catches for, I want to say, 21 yards. He looked okay. I think he's still really just coming into his own here. He's going to be a really good player for the Seahawks this season. He might take a little bit to develop, like most rookies will, but no real news on JSN. Just thought it was notable that he played while the other 2 wide receivers didn't. Charbonnet looked okay as well. He had a couple really nice runs, really physical runs. He really leaned into a guy with his shoulder at one point, so I think that shoulder injury that we heard was bothering him earlier on in the offseason, that's probably not so big of a deal. Charbonnet is going to be healthy heading into the season, assuming nothing else happens over the next couple weeks, and Pete Carroll said he liked what he saw out of Charbonnet. I will note that Kenneth Walker returned to practice on Saturday, so Walker's going to be healthy. I doubt Walker will really play in the preseason much, given that we know what we see in him. He's still going to be the starting running back for the Seahawks this season, but Charbonnet will get meaningful snaps, and seeing him perform well should give you some pause about how well you really expect Kenneth Walker to perform this season in fantasy. Next, we've got the game between the Packers and the Bengals. Romeo Doubs looked good as he continues to across every single offseason, it seems like. And he scored a touchdown this week. I do think Romeo Doubs is a legitimate shot to lead the Packers in targets this season. I think he's going pretty under the radar. And in a deeper league, I think he's a nice, really late round dart throw, although I don't really think he's got much of a ceiling. Jordan Love looked okay as well. He was just a mediocre quality game manager, but nothing special. Luke Musgrave was involved for the Packers as well at the tight end position. He saw 3 targets early on in the game. He's been rising for me quite a bit this offseason. They've raved about how athletic he is, how fast he is, and a guy that could really stretch the field for them at the tight end position. Given how little explosiveness there is in this Packers offense, I do think Musgrave's got a shot to be a really involved part of the offense. And if I'm going to be drafting a tight end really late, I think he could be a late round flyer that you could take if you're interested. Chris Evans showed the most promise of any Bengals running back that on Saturday. Maybe it was Friday. I still believe it was Saturday. He and Chase Brown will be competing to be the backup for Joe Mixon. There are more legal issues facing Joe Mixon as well. He's got 2 civil suits coming in towards him. I'm not by any means a lawyer or anything, but from my understanding, it sounds like he would likely receive a suspension next season. Not this season if that comes to fruition, but for this season, it probably doesn't matter, but it is something to keep an eye on with Joe Mixon. Just a little bit of hesitation there. I still believe that Chase Brown would be the backup you want to own. Chris Evans really profiles to be more of a pass-catching back, but both of them have looked good at spurts this offseason, and Chris Evans is a decent player himself, so it could make things pretty muddy if something were to happen to Joe Mixon this season. Next, we've got the Falcons at Dolphins. Achane played quite a bit for the Dolphins, although he was the 3rd running back to sneeze snaps for the Dolphins behind Myles Gaskin. That should be a little bit concerning, but he looked really good. He was a really quality pass catcher. The Dolphins' offensive line, however, did look really bad. They started 4 of their starters, and really they were just unable to get blocking for anybody. Achane, however, was used all over the field. He returned a nice kick really well. He had 4 catches, and I believe he had 11 carries in this game. So Achane's going to be a guy that they want to use quite a bit this season. I think he's pretty safely locked into that 3rd down back role, and them not signing Dalvin Cook, as I'll touch on later, Dalvin Cook signed with the Jets today. That does really open up a really nice door of opportunity for any running back in Miami. Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert got the day off here, so they are clearly the number 2 running backs in this offense. However, those guys are veterans with injury histories. They obviously weren't going to put them in much harm's way this season, especially in the preseason. So it's no shock that they didn't play in week 1 of the preseason, but it is clear right now that Devon Achane is at best the number 3 running back in this offense. And the only real takeaway from the Falcons, who benched pretty much all of their starters, is that they have a ton of depth at running back, even behind Patterson, Bijan, and Algier. All of their running backs that played performed really well. I think that this is going to be a team that's going to be able to run the ball really effectively this season, and it makes you really excited about Bijan because of how well schemed they are in the running game. Next up, we've got the Steelers at Bucks. There wasn't really a whole lot to learn from this game. However, I will say that Kenny Pickett looked pretty good. He looked to have taken a bit of a step forward this season compared to what we saw last season. George Pickens really flashed an ability to separate after the catch as well. It's not really something we saw very much out of him last season, but he made a really nice catch over the middle of the field, made a defender miss, score a touchdown. He was coming off of a torn ACL out of college, so it's possible that this being his 2nd year removed from that, we could see him be a more explosive athlete in open space. Maybe this is the season that George Pickens could break out. I haven't really been betting on it because I still think he's going to be the number 2, maybe the number 3 target in the Steelers offense, but the talent's there. If you want to take a late round shot on Pickens, I think it's totally fine. And from the Bucs point of view, nobody really that meaningful played snaps. Rashad White got the day off. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin got the day off. Both quarterbacks played quite a bit, and both honestly looked pretty bad. The offensive line for the Tampa Bay was brutal. This could be a concern again, as the main issue for this team last season on offense, but they just really couldn't run the ball. They averaged 3 yards per carry last season. The offensive line was supposed to be better this season, but I really didn't see it this week. If they continue to struggle with the offensive line, it really could limit Rashad White's upside, and honestly, that's going to make the whole offense struggle this season. So a little more pessimistic on the Bucs side of things than I was coming into the week. Next up, we've got the Giants at Lions. Not a whole lot of meaningful players played in this game. However, Jahmyr Gibbs was utilized quite often. He had 18 snaps, which turned into 7 touches for 37 yards. He made a couple of really nice plays, made a couple of defenders miss. I think this is just further confirmation that Jahmyr Gibbs is a really good player, although it sort of seems like David Montgomery's the starter. I would expect David Montgomery to maybe even out-touch Jahmyr Gibbs this season. I think it's going to be a really quality 1-2 punch. They're going to be really good players this season, but I still think that this does really support the claim that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be a really good player this season. And really there wasn't much else to report. The Giants didn't play many of their players. Lions didn't play many of their guys either. So not too much to report on either side of the ball for these teams. Next, we've got the Commanders at the Browns. Sam Howell looked pretty mediocre, although he did complete about 75% of his passes. I believe he went 9 for 12 for 75 yards and a touchdown, and he did lead a scoring drive. He threw a really nice touchdown to Jahan Dotson. The pass was a little bit behind Dotson, but Dotson made the most of it, made the catch, made a guy miss, and got in the end zone. Jacoby Brissett, however, looked really good as well. He did have a turnover early in the game, but he led a really nice drive. He had a long touchdown run himself, and I think this is going to be a team that I think Sam Howell will probably get the starting job, start week 1, and he'll probably be the guy that gets most of the starting opportunities this season, but if he struggles, there will eventually be a time where we'll probably see Jacoby Brissett at some point this season. I think they're probably going to perform pretty similarly to each other, so I don't think it really matters from a fantasy standpoint who's starting, but it's just something to note that you could have some uncertainty at the quarterback position. Granted, what's new is the Washington Commanders. They start at least 2 quarterbacks almost every single year. So on the Browns side of the ball, none of their meaningful players played snaps. However, Dorian Thompson-Robinson looked great again in backup duty or starting for the Browns. He's looked really explosive. I think that obviously Deshaun Watson's going to be the starter here, but if you're in a dynasty league, I think Dorian Thompson-Robinson could be a guy that you want to take a look at. Maybe he's on waivers still, and if he is, you could snag him and see if something happens. He was a 5th-round draft pick. He's a really explosive athlete. I think he could be a good quarterback eventually at some point, but obviously odds are pretty low for 5th-round quarterback to ever be meaningful, but he's looked really great so far, so if you want to take a stab at him in dynasty, I think that's totally okay. Next up, we've got the Broncos, the Cardinals. The Broncos played their starters for like a quarter and a half in this one, and Russ actually looked pretty good. The stat line's a little bit deceiving. I believe he completed 7 of 13 passes for like 70-something yards and a touchdown. The Broncos' offensive line struggled quite a bit. Russ led all of the preseason quarterbacks in terms of pressure rate. He was pressured on like 63% of his dropbacks, so that's really not great. You would really hope the Broncos could pass protect and run block much better than they did in this week. And on top of that, there were 2 to 3 drops by pass catchers. Judy had a really bad drop. Samaje Perine had a drop, and Adam Troutman had like a maybe drop, depending on how you want to call it. Speaking of Troutman, though, it is important to note here that he did legitimately start over Greg Dulcich. A lot of people sort of batted an eye at him being listed as the starter on their depth chart, but Dulcich really only played on passing downs. He came in on 3rd down. Adam Troutman made some really nice blocks. He actually had 2 catches as well. He was an involved player in this offense, and if this is going to be how they legitimately want to run things, then it really could put some cold water on my expectations for Greg Dulcich this season. It's too early for me to wave the white flag on that, but I really am a little bit more pessimistic on Dulcich coming into week 2 of the preseason. On the Cardinals side of the ball, Colt McCoy played pretty well. He went 4 for 4 on his opening drive for 17 yards. This offense is going to be much better under Colt McCoy than they will be under Clayton Tune. Michael Wilson started as the wide receiver at wide receiver 2. Obviously, the wide receiver 1 really for them in this team as Marquise Brown got the day off. And Rondale Moore only played in 3 wide receiver sets. That's important to note because even though I think he's going to be the number 2 target as the wide receiver, if he's only going to be on the field in 3 wide receiver sets, it's going to be interesting to see how many of those sets this team runs. Zach Ertz has been cleared to play. He's going to start week 1 for this team, and they're probably going to want him and McBride on the field quite a bit. That would mean they're going to be running a lot of 2 wide receiver, 2 tight end sets with James Conner in the backfield, and that really could limit the upside for Rondale Moore here. I still think Rondale Moore is a perfectly fine late round flyer, but I'm probably going to have to adjust my rankings on him just a little bit and knock him down because if he's not on the field, you can't catch passes. Next up, we've got the Bears at the Titans. Justin Fields had a perfect day, really. He completed all 3 of his passes for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. What's important to note here, though, is that not a single pass went past the line of scrimmage. He effectively threw 3 screen passes. 2 of them were 60-yard touchdowns. The screen to DJ Moore was actually a pretty bad throw. It was behind DJ Moore. He had to turn around and grab it, and the blocking was just so good that things worked out. So I don't think I really learned anything new out of Justin Fields here. I saw him complete 3 passes. All 3 of them were relatively easy, and he actually missed on one of them effectively. What does matter, though, here is that the weapons were marketably better than what they were last season. Normally, Justin Fields was the only explosive weapon on this offense, and we did see that this offense actually has some firepower on outside of Fields. Another really important note is that his second touchdown went as a 60-yard pass to Khalil Herbert. Khalil Herbert stayed on 3rd down for that play. He played all 7 of the snaps with the starters. If he's going to be the clear-cut starter, he obviously needs to be moving up draft boards quite a bit. He's been like a 9th-round draft pick so far, and I think I'd be comfortable taking him up in like the 7th round at this point. He's likely going to be the starting running back for the Bears. He's a really efficient player if he gets touches, and if he can get 15 touches a game, he's going to be a monster in fantasy this season and a really great value. For the Titans, not a whole lot to look at. Both quarterbacks, Malik Willis and Will Levis, sort of alternated series here. They struggled both quite a bit. They each had their ups and downs. There's no real clear backup to Ryan Tannehill here, and I think all that really matters is that if Tannehill goes down, you're probably going to be really disappointed with the Titans' offense this season. Next up, we've got the Colts at the Bills. Anthony Richardson did throw a pick on his first drive. He did bounce back a little bit. He had a couple nice scrambles. He made a really nice throw to Alec Pierce on what should have been like a 40-yard pass, but Alec Pierce did drop that pass, but regardless, Anthony Richardson showed some flashes. I will note that the offense actually looked better under Gardner Minshew under Anthony Richardson, but I think that's to be expected with Minshew being the veteran here. I would still expect Anthony Richardson to probably get the start week 1. They're just going to want to take the training wheels off and see what can happen with him this season. Nothing really to report on the Bills side of the ball. They pretty much sat all of their players this week. We just didn't really get a whole lot of information really out of them. I will note that it was really cool to see DeMar Hamlin play in this one. It's really cool that he's made it back, but from a fantasy standpoint, nothing really to write home about there. Next up, we've got the Jets at the Panthers. On the Panthers side of the ball, I think it's just important to note their offensive line struggled really bad. their offensive line just couldn't handle the Jets' front. It really made it impossible for them to get much going. Bryce Young was unable to complete many of his passes. He wasn't able to throw the ball downfield because he just had no time. They couldn't run the ball either, really. The Jets' defensive front is really good, so I don't want to read too much into this, but I've been really high on guys like Miles Sanders this season, and if this offensive line is going to struggle, that's really going to limit the upside there. So it's important to note, no reason to panic at all. I think this is pretty much just a wash. I don't really want to read too much into it, but if the offensive line struggles for the next couple weeks in preseason, then I would maybe turn up the dial on my alarm just a little bit for Sanders. On the Jets side of the ball, again, they didn't play any of their starters in this one, but they did sign Dalvin Cook today. He's likely the backup behind Breece Hall when all these running backs are healthy, but I think he's going to see more work early on in the season. This is a pretty strong indicator by the Jets that they don't really think Breece Hall is 100% either. They gave Dalvin Cook a one-year deal up to $8.6 million. That is a ton of money for a running back in this market. I think that we could honestly see close to a 50-50 split, and this could be a scenario where both these running backs just aren't all that fantasy relevant. I will note, though, that in Green Bay, we had several seasons where there were two quality fantasy running backs with Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams, and then Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. Aaron Rodgers has been capable of throwing the ball to the running backs quite a bit. This could be an offense that just sort of leans on the two running backs and then Garrett Wilson, and if that's the case, there could be some value here. Both these running backs are really talented, and they're probably going to run the ball quite a bit, especially if they're winning in games. So I think there could be value for these guys, but we just have to see where all their ADPs land. I think that they're both going to be like, I'd have Cook ranked as like a fringe wide receiver 30 probably, and Breece Hall is going to be like a really low-end running back 2 for me. So the ceiling for either one of these guys is pretty much gone, barring an injury to the other one. I would still prefer Breece Hall to Dalvin Cook, although I think that Dalvin Cook's going to be the one that starts the season stronger and then fades off as Breece Hall gets healthier. Next up, we've got the Jaguars at Cowboys. The Jaguars' offense looked really good, and Calvin Ridley played really well. I think an important thing to note for the Jaguars is that Christian Kirk only operated in 3 wide receiver sets here. When they were running 2 wide receiver sets, we saw Zay Jones and Calvin Ridley both on the field. I don't think that's going to matter a ton because I expect the Jaguars to run a ton of 3 wide receiver sets this season with Ridley, Jones, and Kirk on the field, along with either Etienne or Bigsby in the backfield, and then Evan Ingram obviously at tight end. It's just important to note that if they had happened to run 2 wide receiver sets, Christian Kirk's probably not going to be on the field. Reports out of training camp that Zay Jones looked really great as well. And if that happens, I think you could see a little bit of cold water on the Christian Kirk season here. I'm not really worried about that because if they're passing the ball, there will be 3 wide receivers in the field, and I think Christian Kirk's going to be able to make those plays, but it's just a little bit of a concern here. We want to see what happens in week 2. Another thing on the Jaguars is that Tank Bigsby looked really good. He had a really nice run, and he came in for the starters for the short yardage work. This pretty strongly indicates what I've been worried about for ETN so far this offseason, and that's that in terms of short yardage work and what probably means goal line work, ETN will be coming off the field for Tank Bigsby. ETN did play every other snap for the starters, so ETN might not be seeding that third down work that I was worried about him losing, but he's still probably going to lose goal line work, and it's going to be a bit of a concern for his fantasy upside. On the Cowboys side of the ball, Deuce Vaughn was the main takeaway for me here. He just looked really explosive. He made a lot of just really impressive jukes. He really just knows how to make guys miss. He is tiny. I'm worried about him being able to hold up over the course of a long season, but especially in PPR formats, he's going to be a guy that's going to get some touches for the Cowboys. I would expect him to be extremely efficient when he touches the ball as well, and he could just be a really interesting late-round flyer. Obviously, he's not really a true handcuff because if something were to happen to Tony Pollard, there's no way that Deuce Vaughn's going to handle that many touches every single week, but he's going to be a good player. I think he's going to be a guy that can be catching a couple passes a week and a guy that you could use in PPR formats, especially as like a bye-week fill-in throughout the course of the season. And the other thing I want to note is that Nathan Rourke, the backup quarterback for the Jacksonville Jaguars, just made a hell of a play. Go watch it. It's one of the more fun passes you'll see all season probably. It's really fun, and I highly recommend watching it. It was a lot of fun to watch. Next up, we've got the Eagles at Ravens. Justice Hill led the backfield for the Ravens, and that backfield is just going to be a mess for the Ravens if Dobbins holds out. It's important to note that J.K. Dobbins was activated off the PUP today, and he was back in practice. I think that all of that signs are pointing towards J.K. Dobbins being their starter week 1. I don't think that was ever truly in doubt, but I think we did get a little bit of clarity, and that being that Justice Hill likely will operate ahead of Gus Edwards if J.K. Dobbins is out. And I think this just means that in general this backfield is going to be super messy. Melvin Gordon didn't really play till the second half. He's probably just on the roster bubble. I don't really expect too much out of him, but we're really looking at J.K. Dobbins or bust for this Ravens backfield. On the Eagles side of the ball, Gainwell seems to be the primary winner here, as he was the only Eagles running back to sit. We saw that Swift looked really great on his limited touches. Boston Scott played, Trey Sermons played, and Rashad Penny played 27 snaps and looked pretty mediocre. He averaged under 4 yards per carry. He is obviously still working back from his injury, but this sort of puts some cold water on the belief that he might be the starter week 1. I personally believe I'm going to have to adjust my rankings. Probably still going to put Swift as my running back 1 on this team, and then probably go Gainwell and then Rashad Penny. I just think that Swift's the most explosive player here. He's clearly going to be a guy that makes the roster, and he just looks too good. He's going to get too many touches and be a guy that's going to be fantasy relevant this season, but Gainwell is a legitimately quality late round flyer right now. We'll see what happens to his ADP after this weekend, but I think that Gainwell's a perfectly fine pick, and I'm still fine taking Penny where he's being drafted because of the upside, but I think there's a very real chance that he doesn't make the roster this season, and if that happens, obviously he would just be a huge bust where you're taking him. So all the more reason to have your drafts later on in the offseason, but for right now, I think Rashad Penny's still a fine late round draft pick if you want to. Next up, we've got the Chargers at the Rams. Not a whole lot to learn here. Quentin Johnston did play for the Chargers, while the top 3 wide receivers in Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Joshua Palmer did not. So this could suggest that he's still a wide receiver 4 in the pecking order. I still believe he's their wide receiver 3. They just want to get the rookie on the field. He was inconsistent. He had a couple of drops, but he did score a touchdown as well. He's going to be a really good player for the Chargers once he gets going. I think he's going to be a really nice draft pick by them. On the Rams side of the ball, Stetson Bennett looked pretty respectable after starting off poorly. He could potentially offer a higher floor for these wide receiver, these pass catchers in LA if something were to happen to Stafford. And Puka Nacua scored as well. He's a guy that you could be taking a flyer on late in drafts. There's a ton of opportunity behind Cooper Kupp. He could legitimately work his way into the number 2 wide receiver role, and I think he's a neat little player as well. So if you're going to take a late flyer on Puka, he did look good this week, and his stock should only be going up from here. Next up, we've got the Chiefs at the Saints. The Saints starters played one drive, and they looked really great. They scored a touchdown. Carr really spread the ball around quite a bit. Juwan Johnson was seemingly operating as the tight end 1 here. We didn't really see much out of either Jimmy Graham or Foster Moreau here. Alvin Kamara was the clear starter, playing most of the snaps with the starting players. He looked really good as well. There's been a lot of reports that have camped for them that he's actually looked a lot better coming into this offseason than he did last season. They said they really worked on his rehab, really worked out his muscle imbalance issues, and it's really going to be a lot of reason for optimism with Kamara. I think Kamara is still being drafted a little bit too high. He's normally going the 5th round right now. If he could drop a round or 2, I'd be interested, but it's just something to keep an eye on. What's not listed here as well is that Kendre Miller suffered a knee sprain. He could still be ready for week 1, but if that's not the case, then Jamal Williams is going to be the running back in this backfield for the first 3 weeks. And then, honestly, a rookie getting injured in camp doesn't really bode well for his odds of being super fantasy relevant at any point in the season. I think that this does make Jamal Williams more enticing a late round pick, and it does really increase my odds of drafting Alvin Kamara later on if he can slip a little bit to me. For the Chiefs, Justin Ross looked good. He scored a touchdown. He was a really quality player for him. He was not a starter for the team. There were 3 wide receivers in Sky Moore, MVS, and I'm blanking on the third one that started with Mahomes. Mahomes only threw 2 passes, wasn't really all that involved. CEH was involved for this team. I think it's just going to make this be a real headache of a backfield. We still haven't seen Isaiah Pacheco play this offseason. Jerick McKinnon's still going to be an involved part of the offense. Denarian Prince has looked good in the training camp for them as well. So this could be a 3, even a 4-headed backfield this season. If that's the case, it's just going to be an absolute headache. I'm pretty much staying away from all of them except McKinnon because McKinnon's super cheap right now, but I just can't find myself really drafting Isaiah Pacheco right now at his current ADP. And last but not least, we've got the 49ers at the Raiders. Trey Lance looked mediocre to bad. He was playing with all the backups for this team, but he completed 1 pass for a touchdown. It's one of the worst touchdown throws you'll ever see. He threw it right into the arms of a Raider defender, and somehow it got bounced up into the air and thrown basically to the tight end for the Niners after that pass. So it was an up and down day for Trey Lance, to say the least. They didn't run him very much, but he just looked pretty mediocre. On the Raiders side of the ball, Zamir White was the clear backup for the Raiders. He got 13 carries in this one. If something were to happen, or if Josh Jacobs were to actually hold out, I think Zamir White is the clear number 1 favorite to be the operating number 1 running back here. He didn't look great. He had 13 carries for 43 yards. I don't think he's a very explosive player. I have not really liked what I've seen on film out of Zamir White, but volume is king in fantasy. If he's going to be a guy that's going to be the starter for them, he's worth a late round flyer right now just in case something happens to Jacobs. Not listed here as well, Aiden O'Connell, their 4th round draft pick this season, played quarterback pretty much the whole game for the Raiders this week. He actually looked really good. He really commanded the pocket. He was a really quality player. He was a decent thrower of the ball in college, and honestly, there's always a chance that he starts at some point this season, given Jimmy Garoppolo is their starter. He's a very injury-prone quarterback, and if you're in dynasty leagues and you want to take a stab at Aiden O'Connell, then just throw him on your bench. I think that's a perfectly fine pickup to make. So that'll do it for the Week 1 preseason recap. I hope I really helped keep you guys up to date, gave you guys all the information you need to know. If there's anything that you guys think I missed, feel free to let me know in the comments. I'm happy to fill that in as well. I can add a disclaimer here. If you have any questions about things I said, feel free to let me know. Want my opinion on anything, feel free to let me know in the comments as well. Up next, I'll be going over my safest tight ends to draft to sort of finish up that video, and then I'll be getting into some must-draft players with a lot of upsides, some league-winning assets. I'll get into some just general tips and tricks for how to operate over the course of a fantasy football season, really help you guys be as best equipped as possible to go into your seasons. And then one of you guys as well made a request for me to go into some Dynasty startup auction content. I'll put out a quick video on that as well. By no means am I exactly an expert on that, and it's be a little bit niche, but really want to help cover all the bases here. So been a lot of fun making all these videos. If this is your first time on the channel, I want to thank you so much for stopping by. Please do subscribe if you want more content like this. I'll be getting a video out every single week throughout the course of the off season. If not 2 a week, 2 a day, or every single day throughout the course of the off season. If not 2 a day at some point, given that we're really getting into the thick of it. Really want to keep getting you guys as much information as possible. We're putting out several videos a week throughout the course of the season as well. It's going to be a lot of fun. If you did like this video, please do give it a thumbs up. It really helps with the algorithm, really helps me know that I'm doing a good job as well, and really just helps grow the channel as well. So it's been a lot of fun. I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.